Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before, and I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years. Quite a few different styles, but I think it's fair to say that these days this brewery is best known for their different IPAs, but also for their lager beers. And in my opinion, they are one of the best lager producers here in Sweden, actually. So if those are styles that you're interested in, this is a brewery that I would highly recommend that you check out. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one that I have tasted actually a couple of weeks ago in the tap room, so it's nice to get a can of it and do a proper sit down review of this beer actually. So hopefully it's as good as I remember, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Lund to Malmö, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Hyllie Bryggeri. So this particular beer is called the Spring Pils. It comes in at 5% ABV, and they're describing this one simply as an unfiltered Pilsner lager beer. So yeah, this beer was released in the middle of March 2022. I actually can't remember whether this one was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt or whether it was released as part of the Tillfällig assortment. I honestly can't remember because they released both around the same time actually. There's a lot more Tillfälliga releases at the moment. And they've changed the date. They've put the date of the local releases to be a little bit later on in the month as well. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly when this one was released, but it was released sometime around the kind of 10th, 11th of March 2022. But yeah, 5% Pilsner beer. This is a style that we know Hyllie Bryggeri do very well, of course. So yeah, I really recommend this brewery if you're into your lager beers, as I am. But let's crack on with it and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hyllie Bryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Hyllie Bryggeri once again. So Hyllie Bryggeri started off as the homebrewing experimentations of Michael Nathorst, who is originally from Vintria, a few minutes to the south of Hyllie in southern Malmö. But for a number of years, he was also a home brewer, and he built up his own brewery in his garage where he was experimenting with brewing different beers along with his friends. But he started brewing back in around 2013. So he worked for a number of years in the plumbing industry, and for a period of time he was working for 4 days as a plumber, but also 1 day with the brewery. But he's good friends with Torsten Ekne, who was the original owner of Beerditch in Malmö, and when Beerditch began, Torsten really encouraged Michael to go professional. So Michael decided to turn his garage brewery into a proper brewery and registered the company officially in 2015. So these days, Michael is joined at the brewery by Erik Fritihoff, who is a partner in the company, and he deals with the sales and marketing side of things, but he's also one of the founders of the Great Swedish Beer Festival. But in 2019, the brewery joined forces with Psychopipes and Limhamnsbrygger to form a new company that owns a brewery building, and for a short period of time, the companies were all brewing their beer there. They had a 1,000 litre brew kit, but this arrangement unfortunately only lasted for a couple of months before Hyllie Bryggeri moved out and went to a farm near Fintria, because I think there was just conflicts of brewing schedules and just all of this kind of thing. But throughout 2020, they were contract brewing a number of their beers in different places, but they very recently invested in a new premises in Malmö next to the central station, which is a former car park basically. But this has been converted into a brewery. They've got a 2,000 litre brewing system in there, and they also recruited Johan Lagerkrantz to come in as their head brewer, and he had spent 5 years working as a brewer down in New Zealand. But they've also opened up their Stormgatan tap room as well. That opened very shortly after. I think, yeah, very shortly after the brewery itself opened up, and they've just been developing new beers ever since. They have been getting gradually more and more prolific. But as of March 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 95 different kinds of beer. And as I say, this brewery, in my opinion, are best known for their different kinds of IPAs, but also for their lager beers as well. One of the best lager beer producers in Sweden, I think. And they do it regularly as well. I really, really like the lager beers that these guys do. Probably my favourite beers from this brewery would be the Skånsk Lager, but also the Hyllie as well. The Hyllie is a really old school West Coast IPA. Whereas, yeah, the Skånsk Lager is a nice kind of, it's almost like a hybrid. It's got a little bit of the kind of Pilsner Urquell bitterness to it, but it has that kind of nice, smooth Munich Helles type vibe as well, actually. So, yeah, very, very nice lager beer, that one. So the Skånsk Lager is one that I would highly, highly recommend that you check out. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Hyllie Bryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork of this one then before we open up. There you can see at the top of the can, there is the Hyllie Bryggeri symbol, the nice water tower that you'll see whenever you go past or through Hyllie on the train. There you can see spring pills, and yeah, the artwork on this is pretty nice. It's a little bit different compared to what we've seen from Hyllie Bryggeri in the past, but yeah, quite nice. 440ml can, this one. I believe this cost me, I want to say this only really cost me about 30 or maybe 35 Swedish kroner. Let's go with 35 because that seems a bit more, pardon me, reasonable for a 440 can. So that's about €3.50, somewhere in the region of £3 sterling, and I guess that's probably like a little bit over $4, $4.25 American for those of you who are watching over there. But yeah, 5% unfiltered Pilsner beer, this one, and as I say, it released in March of 2020. Not sure if it was the local release or if it was the temporary Tilfällig release. So yeah, let's crack this guy open and get on with the tasting then. A 5% unfiltered Pilsner, the Hyllie Bryggeri Spring Pils. So this should be quite nice. So remember, the Pilsner beer is a lager beer, and the definition of a lager beer is one that is fermented using bottom fermented yeast. That's the yeast that ferments at a lower temperature, usually between about 8 to 12 degrees, I think is the typical range. So yeah, the Pilsner as a style originated in the city of Pilsen, now in the Czech Republic in Bohemia. It was developed by a German brewer back in about 1840 or 1860, something like that. And yeah, the original Pilsner beer is Pilsner Urquell, so that is one that you really, really should try. But yeah, Pilsner is one of various different types of lager beer that you find, and if I remember correctly, Pilsner is actually it's the most popular style of beer in the world. It's drunk all over the place. But yeah, lots and lots of different kinds of lager beers, of course. You've got the Helles, the Dunkel, the Schwarzbier, the different kinds of Bocks, all of these kind of things in Germany, the Vienna lagers. In the Czech Republic, you've got the Svetlis, the Leidsaks, the Černies, Tmavis, all of these kind of things. There are lots and lots of different lager beers out there, but the main difference, of course, is the fact they use that bottom fermenting yeast, low temperature fermentation, in comparison to ales, where it's a high temperature fermentation. But yeah, that should be a kind of brief enough history of the Pilsner style of beer for you. A Czech style, of course, though that at that time it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But yeah, as you can see with this one anyway, it's poured very, very nicely. I would say it's poured with just under or about a 3/4 finger head, and this head is very slightly kind of off-white. I wouldn't describe it as being perfectly white and bright. It looks a little bit more kind of off-white in that sense. The beer itself, I would say it's poured a lovely kind of bright golden straw colour. There's one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, but a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks pretty calm in terms of its carbonation. There you can see there, it has got that nice kind of unfiltered sort of natural haze to it, which I think is very, very nice. But yeah, this is to be expected when they call it an unfiltered Pilsner. But yeah, lovely bright golden straw colour. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will of course play a role in the colour as well, but you don't normally have to care about that when it comes to Pilsner lager beers. But yeah, it looks very, very nice, this one, and pretty much as you would expect for the style. So I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance. Let's go on and have a little look at the aroma for this one then. So, nose time. Oh yeah, that does smell very nice. Now, as I've told you, for me, when it comes to sort of Pilsner beers, the thing that I'm always, these lager beers, what I'm always looking for with these is how authentic they smell and taste in comparison to what you would find in the Czech Republic or in Germany or whatever. And the thing with Hyllie Bryggeri is they're really, really good at this. They seem to just have a real knack of doing these lager beers. Yeah, Hyllie Bryggeri, they really just do some awesome, easy drinking lager beer. So honestly, try them. You won't regret that. You really won't regret it. But yeah, the aroma that you get from this one, I think, is very, very nice actually. So yeah, straight away with this one, let's just kind of break it down for you then. The first impression of this is that it's a really nice, quite crisp, but slightly bready lager beer, this one actually. So yeah, when it comes to comparing the Czech Pilsen to the German Pilsner, in my opinion, usually the main difference is that the Czech ones tend to be a little bit more kind of yeasty and bready in a sense, almost a little bit creamy, whereas the German ones tend to be very light and crisp and sometimes a wee bit more biscuity actually. So yeah, we have to bear that in mind between these. So when we try this one, we will talk about exactly what this one is, if you like. But to me, this one actually has a little bit of it seems to be a little bit straddling the line. It has a little bit of the kind of more yeasty, kind of bready note to it, but also a little bit of the crispness you'd expect. So there's a wee bit of both Czech and German influence going into this one. So yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, the malty backbone then, I would say you can smell a little touch of bread crust in there. You get that sort of wet, white bready kind of character out of this one. I always find that these lager beers tend to give you this sort of wet, white bready type vibe to them as well. But yeah, aroma wise, this one is really nice in that sense. So yeah, a little bit of bread crust for sure, a little bit of that kind of straight up grainy bread crust, the wet sort of white bready character in there, but then there's also a little bit of that kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sweetness as well. I don't know if I get I think I get a little hint of a slightly, a straight up kind of caramel. I do get that little hint of a biscuity, kind of oily, kind of caramelly note out of it, but there's also a wee bit of that kind of wet biscuity, and yeah, there is also a little bit of that wee kind of wet biscuity, and just bready aroma underneath. It's quite straight shooting, this beer. I mean, Pilsners are not the most complex things in terms of aroma. But, spilling a little bit down myself there, that's helpful. But yeah, they're not the most complex things in terms of aroma, but I always just find them very attractive. And I think that's just because of my time in Germany and Czech Republic and stuff like that. But yeah, malty-wise, this one's quite nice. I think there is a fair little bit of yeasty character to this one. You can smell a little bit of that sort of yeasty kind of creaminess out of the beer. You can smell that slightly more dense bready character as well. And for me, I think that works very nicely. So it gets a thumbs up from me on the malty yeasty side of things. I can see that my little splash there has gone down on the camera. You can see it, it's great. But yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So for me, I'm pretty sure this beer is using a German hop actually. Because you can smell that typical nice brightness out of it. These guys like to use a few of them, and so I wouldn't be surprised if this is something like Hercules or Sapphire or something like that, because this beer does smell as if it's going to be a little bit more kind of bitter actually. It's got quite a nice depth to the floral aromatic notes. But yeah, you do have a little bit of earthiness out of this one. You can smell a wee bit of that earthiness at the back of the nose. You've also got a little bit of a kind of herbal character in there as well, but also a good little bit of you do also have a nice little bit of a floral aromatic sort of vibe to the beer too. So that floral aromaticity, as I said, has a bit of depth to it, but it's also got like a wee touch of spiciness, I think, which is quite nice. But the grassy side of this beer, I think, is quite nice. It's got a nice kind of smooth grassiness to it. There's a wee bit of a kind of zesty character as well. So yeah, wee touch of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character, a slightly deeper, a slightly deeper and almost slightly spicy floral aromatic note out of it. But you've also got that kind of, you do also have a little bit of that lighter grassy and zesty kind of thing out of it too. So the way that this beer goes together on the hoppy side of things is quite nice. On the fruity side of it, there's not too much to report. Again, it's kind of what you'd expect. You do get a little bit of that kind of almost peary ester out of it, you know, a teeny little bit of apricot or something like that. And maybe a little bit of, you know, you get a little bit of that typical kind of grassy, slightly lemony sort of thing. So yeah, the way that the aroma goes together in this beer, I think, is pretty nice. It gives me everything I would want from a Pilsner beer in terms of the aroma. So this one smells quite nice actually. So as I always say, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it's about time that we have a taste of this one then. So this is the Spring Pils, an unfiltered Pilsner, coming in at 5% ABV from Hyllie Bryggeri in Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh, that is nice actually. Yeah. Actually, the first impression of this, as I said, I tried this beer in the tap room maybe about 2-3 weeks ago or something like that. And I don't find it as bitter now as I did back then, so that's interesting. But yeah, I really like how that, I do really like how all of that goes together in this one. So this is a really, really nice beer. This is definitely worth trying actually. And as I say, Hyllie Bryggeri, they really just have a knack for these lager beers. But the first impression of it is, it's got this lovely kind of, it has got this lovely kind of Czech, sort of slightly creamy smoothness to it. But it gives you a bit of the German crispness later on. It's got a wee bit more bitterness as well. A bit of an oily, fruity character. It's a very nice lager beer, this one. It really does. It shows you a wee bit of the Czech side, a wee bit of the German side, and it's just lovely and drinkable. And you can't ask for much more than that from a craft Pilsner, should we say. So, let's take a closer look at this then and describe the flavour a little bit more in depth for you. So, yeah, the middle third of your palate then. Pardon me. So yeah, middle third of your palate, you've got that nice, the middle third of your palate there is, you've got a wee bit of that sort of bread crusty kind of vibe to it. So yeah, a little bit of that kind of bread crusty base, which I really, really like. On top of that, you have a little bit of a more, you've got a little bit of that more kind of wet bready character, as I say. So yeah, a little bit of bread crust, a bit of a kind of wet, white, kind of brown bready sort of thing in there as well. And that lingers into the aftertaste. What you will find is that the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, you do get a wee bit of the graininess coming out of the backbone of this. It's almost a little bit like, it almost has a very slight knäckebröd type vibe to it. So that's quite interesting. So as I say, a little bit of a sort of bread crusty type thing, a wee bit of a little bit of a bread crusty vibe, a little bit more of that kind of wet brown bready sort of vibe as well, and then on top of that you get a little bit of a more as you would say, you get a little bit of a more kind of you get a little bit of a more straight up, just normal kind of bread, not the wet bread. You do get a little bit of that. But then on top of that layer, it's a very layered beer, this one, in terms of its malty character. But on top of that, you start to get some of the kind of biscuity, malty characters and things out of this beer that you would normally expect. So you've almost got like a little, sitting on top of the brown bready notes there, on top of that, you've got a little bit of a kind of circle in the middle of your palate. So that circle, there's a base of like, there is a base of kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity sort of character to it. So that is quite interesting. So yeah, you've got that kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity sort of thing in there. And then as you move more toward the kind of centre, as you move more to kind of toward the centre of your palate, you can feel there's a bit more of a kind of concentration there, there's a more kind of oily, there's this more kind of oily, straight up, it's like booziness to the beer. This beer does give you, it's light and drinkable. You do get just a little touch of that more booziness in there, so a really kind of concentrated, boozy, slightly caramelly note in the middle, but then as you move further out from that, you start to get more and more of that McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. But the other thing as well you notice, in that kind of normal bready layer that I was talking about, that's where you get a little touch of an almost creamy character out of this beer, and that is something that you would associate a little bit more with the Czech lager beers rather than the German ones. The German ones are all about, kind of thin, crisp malt base and things, but you do have the kind of biscuity side of the German lager beers in this one as well, the German Pilsners, I should say. But this one, I think, from the malty perspective in the middle third of the palate, it is pretty nice. Let's focus on the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you get that little bit of bready, you get a little bit of that sort of bready build up in this one, which I really like. But then the base of that back third of the palate, you do get a little bit more of a kind of intense bread crust. As I've always said, more bitter flavours come out toward the back of the palate, the sweeter ones come out more further forward. But yeah, you've got a little bit more of an intense graininess to the beer. Then on top of that, you can feel the bready layer is just a little bit thicker. Actually, you can feel it is just a little bit more thicker, but it's also a wee bit more grainy as well. And in these terms, it gives you a little bit more of a kind of bitter flavour too. But sitting on top of that, you can feel the yeasty character of the beer. So it just feels like a slightly more dense kind of bread ball type thing, but you've also got a little bit of a kind of crackery, you do get a little bit of this sort of, crackery, slightly woody vibe out of this one. You a little bit of that Jacob's cream crackery type vibe, but then you a wee bit of a more, you do get a Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, a wee bit of a more kind of grainy bread crust, but also that little bit more dense bready character coming out of the beer. So that is really quite interesting, this one. I do like how that goes together in this beer as well, I have to say. So, that is really nice in this one. But as you say, on the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller, and as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit. And the flavour just kind of squashes together a wee bit more. So I do like how this goes together. So on the hoppy side of things, I think we said everything we need to about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Hoppy side of things, in the back corners of the palate, you do have a little bit more kind of earthiness coming out of the beer. But then as you move further forward, you've got a little bit of a kind of herbal character as well. So you got good earthiness there, a little bit more of a kind of herbal character. And as you push further forward toward the kind of floral aromatic side of things in this beer, you do get a little bit of a more it has got a little bit of a kind of spicy character to it as well. I do wonder if it's a bit of Sapphire or a bit of Hercules or something like that that's in this one. I'd be very curious to know what hop they've put in this, but yeah, you can feel this beer does have a wee bit of bitterness, but we'll come back to that later. Round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of lighter but still quite smooth grassy character to the beer, which I can certainly appreciate. And yeah, it doesn't really give you a zestiness, it is more a smooth grassy character you get from this one. But yeah, green component is quite nice, and again, what you would expect. So yeah, I'm curious about this, because the other thing it could be a little bit, there might be a little bit of Sats in this, but also one of the slightly higher alpha acid German hops, actually, because you get the smooth grassiness in there, but the kind of spiciness you get yeah, that could be one of two things, either a higher alpha acid German hop or the Czech Sats Jatets hop, as they call it. So yeah, food for thought there as well. But yeah, front third of the palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between middle third, front third and middle third of your beer, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in this one. The base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more of a kind of smooth, bready type vibe once again, which I can certainly appreciate. But yeah, on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's focus on that. So, yeah, the fruity side of the beer is kind of what you would expect from this style. I mean, toward the back of that front third of your palate, there's a slightly more intense citrusy character in there. There's a wee bit more of that kind of oily, a little bit more of that kind of oily, peary sort of thing. You do get a wee bit of that kind of, it's almost got a little bit of a kind of slightly sultana type vibe to it as well, you know, dried white green grapes actually. I do get a little bit of that in the back of that front third of your palate, but then as you move further forward into the front half of the front third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of citrusy kind of thing. There's a wee bit of a kind of lemony note there, maybe a wee touch of lime just on the very front tip of your palate, but yeah, a bit of pear, a bit of sultana, and a wee bit more of a kind of oily, concentrated lemony, kind of slightly limey character coming out of this beer. So yeah, I really like how this one, yeah, I do really like how this beer goes about its business in that sense actually. There's maybe a wee bit touch of a slightly zesty apple-y kind of thing to this too. But overall, as a Pilsner beer, I think this is quite nice. It doesn't do anything overly surprising, but it's just really well crafted, and that's kind of what we've come to expect from Hyllie Bryggeri. I don't know if they've actually done this beer before, come to think of it, and I'm hoping that I haven't reviewed this one before and forgotten about it. But, you know, after 3,200 reviews, I think I can be forgiven for doing that a couple of times. It's only happened once before on the channel, actually, which was quite funny. I was impressed that the person, one of my fans, picked up on that. I think that was a Great Divide beer or something, if I remember correctly. It was something from America, anyway. But yeah, let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So, this beer for me, it is kind of towards the top end of light bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth. The beer does have a slightly more oily feel to it, which I really like actually. But yeah, it's one of these more kind of oily things. But as I say, this one gives you a little bit of that slightly creamy vibe that you would get from a Czech Pilsner beer. But yeah, it goes together. It goes together really nicely in that sense. But yeah, mouthfeel wise, it's nice. In terms of the hoppy bitterness, I think I would say this one feels a little bit more bitter. Maybe this is like maybe about 30, maybe a bit more than that. Maybe it could be like 40 IBUs, something like that. It feels a little bit more bitter than like Pilsner Urquell, and that's, you can feel that with the sort of density of the kind of slightly spicy floral notes that you get out of it. So maybe this is a slightly more bitter Pilsner beer. But yeah, in terms of the malt base, as we said, it's a bit grainy, but you still got a bit of sweetness in there as well. So but the graininess is kind of unique to this one in a sense, but I would say the sweetness is a little bit more like a German Pilsner sort of thing. But the breadiness that you get out of this beer gives you a bit of that Czech creamy type vibe, and the fruity side of the beer is leaning towards the citrusy side of things, of course, which is to be expected in the style, and it's got a bit more of a kind of oily vibe to it as well. But yeah, I think this beer works very, very nicely, and it gets a big thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review, to be honest with you. So yeah, this was the Spring Pils, a 5% unfiltered Pilsner lager beer from Hyllie Bryggeri in Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Give this one a go and see what you think. And as I say, the Skånsk lager is one of my favourite beers actually. What these guys have done, and the Hyllie Pan too is a kind of classic. The new beers are good, but there's always just that nostalgia factor. Like some of the first beers that you try from a brewery that you go on to really like, these are always the ones that stick with you. So yeah, try the Skånsk Lager and the Hyllie Pan, but try the other stuff as well. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hyllie Bryggeri, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. Until the next time, Slanger just now, check out my social media, check out their social media, keep your beer recommendations coming, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Slanger, Skull, cheers, see you guys on the next one. Make sure you check out Hyllie Bryggeri.